Hey everybody, Steve here, and welcome. For those of you returning from the Frankenstrat series, what we did was we striped a guitar body, just like Eddie Van Halen's, and that's what we're going to be using as our body. We're going to go quickly over the parts necessary to build your guitar, and we'll go from there. So obviously you need a guitar body. This is a Strat. This Strat is actually alderwood. Eddie's was actually made out of northern ash. I chose alderwood just because. And we've got basically here a maple neck, and this neck came just bathed in polyurethane, and I wrecked it. Make it look old and stuff like that, and I could have taken it a lot further, but that's going to be good for now. Let's see what else we got. We've got a Floyd Rose Tremolo. This is in one of the originals. So there's that in the whammy bar, and obviously for a guitar you're going to need a pickup. We're using this is a humbucker. So this is actually handmade and potted to replicate Eddie's humbucker from 78 to 82, 83 years. Eddie also had another pickup that was actually in the guitar but not hooked up. He had a 5-position switch that was not hooked up. This is a locking nut, which we'll probably get to later. This is a bag full of EVH tuning knobs. And then from the electrical standpoint, we've got the tone knob, which is actually a volume knob. We've got a 500 potentiometer, which we're going to have to wire up. Pick guard, which has been cut. Backing plate. Strings, reflectors, and let's see what else, and other odds and ends. This is output for the amp cable, and that's pretty much it. So anyhow, what we're going to do is we're going to build this sucker. Obviously, if you're starting, if this is the first video that you're watching, you're not interested in how we striped this guitar, you're going to paint the body however you want to paint the body, and I'm going to get moving on the assembly of this thing, and hopefully once it's finished we'll get a good tone out of it. So first thing I'm going to do with the build is get the neck and the body together. Okay, so we're going to start with mounting the neck to the body of the guitar. It should be a relatively straightforward process. I'm going to go ahead and line this guy up, mark the holes with a pencil, and then I'm going to pre-drill some holes, and then I'll go ahead and use these screws and lock her down. So here we go. And here we are. One step. There it is. Our first step. Now, we're going to put on the tuning pegs. Tuning pegs. Alright, so I've inserted the tuning pegs through the back, and then what you want to do is take a straight edge and make sure they're straight, because we're going to be drilling those holes and locking them down from the back. And in proper Ed fashion, I mismatched the screws using new ones and old ones. New ones are just too shiny. And of course, these are the strings that I'll be using. Alright, so at this point we want to slow down and take some measurements and make sure we do stuff right. Because as you can see, this bridge, it can be pretty much mounted anywhere. I mean, it goes side to side, it goes up and back, and we got to figure out exactly what the deal is. So All right, so from my research, what I've been able to determine is that the distance from the string ending here all the way to the nut is the distance of the nut to the 12th fret times 2. So I did measure this, and the distance to the 12th fret was, I think it was 12 3/4. So 12 3/4 twice is 25 1/2. So what I got for my total distance between the nut and where this guy needs to go on, I think that's the x-axis, back and forth wise, needs to position where the string's coming out at 25 1/2. Now, what about back and forth? Well, back and forth is just as important, and we're not going to just trust the middle. And the reason why I'm not going to trust the middle is because I put the neck on. And Lord knows how cattywampus I put the neck on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the neck and I'm going to take a straight edge, and I'm going to continue that neckline down. And I'll probably end up putting some tape down here. And I want to determine if the neck was continuing down in a perfectly straight line, where would it end up down here? And I want to mark that line, one for that side of the neck and one for that side of the neck. And then I'm going to go based on the middle of that measurement, not just the middle of the guitar. Because honestly, this is my first one. The neck does not look perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and I'm just going to go by the neckline instead of the guitar body middle. So let me tape it up and I'll show you what I mean. All right, so using the straight edge, I actually use the big straight edge. I basically just continued the line right there, and I did it on both sides, and I ended up with this. So now what I want to do is I want to find the center line between here, and that is where I'll center my tremolo. All right, and whipping out the millimeter ruler and the micrometer, they both agree that the total distance is 60 millimeters. So we're going to go ahead and make our center line at 30 millimeters, and we'll go from there. All right, so with the trim centered up, we now know where it goes on this axis. It's going to end up going right there. But now we got to measure where it's going to go on this axis, and for that we're going to use our 25 1/2 from the nut. So I'll go measure that out. All right, so I just want to double check the string contact point. On a Floyd Rose, we're going to cut off the end here because we don't need it. All right, so more specifically, that 25 1/2 measurement corresponds with the distance between the edge of the nut here and the string contact point here. So I'm going to go ahead and measure that out, and then I'm going to go ahead and draw my dots where I'm going to drill. So after carefully marking my holes, I'm going to drill some very, very small pilot holes and go ahead and screw my screws in. Now, there are some nice dowel things that you can use for this, but in true Ed fashion, I'm just going with screws instead of what it's supposed to have. But if you bought a new Floyd Rose and it came with the dowels, then I think it's a 3/8 hole that you have to drill here and a 3/8 hole that you have to drill there, and tap the dowels in. And then there's another mechanism that screws in there, and that's what the Floyd Rose will go to. But we're going to shortcut it and use screws. But before we do the tremolo on the other side, we want to take care of the cavity on the back. This is the spring for the whammy bar, help it go back in place. So let's go ahead and do this part first. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to take this little backing guy right here, and we're going to drill him. We're going to drill these screws into the back of the guitar, and that way these pegs will be standing up. That will be able to hook the springs to the tremolo bar. All right, so those are screwed into place, left loose, because I don't know how much tension the springs are going to have. We can adjust those later. All right, so here we are on the back side. and on the front side. All right, so electrical. This is where we start to have some fun. The Eddie Van Halen Frankenstrat is about as simple of a circuit as you can have on a guitar, because it's just basically one volume knob, one humbucker, and that's going to go to the output for the amp. So essentially what we're going to do is, this is a 500K potentiometer, which means it's got a dial on the other side, and that's where that guy's going to go on the other side. Now it says tone. For those of you who don't know, Eddie actually had a tone knob on his guitar, but it was actually a volume knob. Doing whatever he could to throw the manufacturers off from stealing after they all ripped off the black and white guitar. So we're going to wire this humbucker to the pot, and the pot's got to get grounded to the bridge, and everything's got to get hooked up to here. So this is the way this is going to go. The humbucker, my humbucker, has basically two wires. The insulated, or the insulation, this braided wire here is going to go to ground, and we're going to ground everything on the top of the potentiometer. And the hot is actually going to go to this little guy right here. Okay, so now this little guy right here is going to be the hot out, and it's going to go to the hot of the output jack, which is right here. This third one is the ground, and it's just going to get grounded. We're going to loop this back up, and we're just going to ground it to itself on the top of the potentiometer or the pot. And then of course we've got to ground this guy too, so we're going to ground him from here to the pot, and then the whole thing has to get grounded. So we're actually going to have a green wire going out, which is going to get grounded to the bridge. And we need one, I've got the red wire here. Oh yeah, the red wire is going to be from hot here to hot here. First thing I'm going to do is I want to scuff the pot up a little bit. All right, so testing for resistance, 14.81. So I am digging that. All right. Let's get this baby inside the guitar. All right, so at first I'm just going for a test fit here. And I'm going to put a string on here and figure out the height. And I'll go from there. Make sure to clean your workspace. Make sure you don't have any metal shavings from any previous stuff that we've done, because your humbucker has magnets in it and will pick them up. So the cleaner, the better. All right, let's get fired up. First thing I'm going to do soldering wise is clean my iron. So, clean tip. Let's go ahead and pre-tin some stuff. By pre-tinning, we're just going to let some solder flow into it prematurely. So get the wire hot. The goal here is to get the wire hot, let the solder flow into it. Don't forget to clean the soldering iron off. A little dab. Now this third one we're just going to bend up and back, and we're going to solder it to itself. Now our green wire's got to go up to the bridge. Okay, so at this point everything is pre-tinned, and it's just a matter of wiring stuff up. I can actually take these guys and marry them up a bit. So we're good to go on our wiring. The only thing that we need to wire up now is if you're doing the old Eddie Van Halen special, we're still going to wire this pickup to this switch just for the sake of doing it. It's not going to be hooked up to anything else. It's not going to do anything. This is just, back in the day, this was Eddie's way of throwing off the manufacturers so that they couldn't keep up with what he was doing. All this is just for show. You know, the way the story goes is that he wanted the pickup, but he didn't have the electronics expertise to get it to work, so he just left it in there. Alright, so the next item on my list is this locking nut, and it's going to go where the original nut was, with one major drawback, and that is it doesn't fit at present. So we're actually going to have to do some routing to route off that edge so that will fit in there. So I'll go ahead and get the router out and do that. One thing that you want to do before you cut anything is make sure that this locking nut is the exact same width as the nut you're pulling off. I think mine was 49 millimeters or 48 millimeters, I forget. And this is exactly the same. So it's going to essentially fit right there, but I've got to make the neck nice and flush there. So I'll get the router out and get to that part. So after some pretty piss poor routing, and yes, I know it's piss poor, no need to leave a million comments, it's the first time I've ever tried to route anything, I'm left with this. So that, even though this hangs over, is still enough meat for the two screws to chew into. Okay, so because I'm going to have to hunt for screws for the humbucker, I'm going to go ahead and put the fake one in because I actually have a couple screws for him. Okay, so while still looking for the screws for the humbucker, I was able to find some for this fake 5-position switch, and these guys are now in there. So all the stuff that doesn't matter is in there. Now I gotta find the stuff that matters. Okay, so with a couple screws, the humbucker's in there. Okay, so here's our volume knob, and don't forget to run your ground behind the guitar, and don't forget to run your hot and your ground to the out switch. Out, what is that thing called? Your output through the hole, and then solder it. Don't solder it first. There's the hole, and there's the other hole. So once we get her all soldered up, we're just going to shove it back in there. Okay, so with the output jack wired up, I just went ahead and put some screws in, and I fed another wire through to the bottom, and we're going to ground him to the bridge. So we'll do that now. So after a few minutes of cooling, our last solder is done. Alright, here is where we're at. Everything is in, everything is wired. Nothing to do now. Let's string it up and see if it works. So there's the locking nut, and next is going to be the string retainer. And that's going to go right like that. So I'm going to go ahead and drill the holes and put that guy on. There's a string retainer. Alright, so preliminarily, we're way off. Way off. Got to bring that pickup way up. And might even have to go further than that. Let's see. Alright, so with the pickup in place, and tossed a string on there, and used this little guy right here, alligator clips, to temporarily plug everything up, and I'm getting sound through the pickup, so I'm going to go ahead and solder everything to the 500K potentiometer, just like we did the first time. Okay, so another couple steps. Purists will know that a Frankenstrat is not a Frankenstrat without the 1971 quarter. So we're going to go ahead and put that on the front. And then we've got the reflector pack for the back. And then we should be done. And the cigarettes.